G'day everyone, Jason and Jono here, doing another one in the series, the Answering series, where we pick something, a video, a comments, and reply to it. Is pretty much what we do. Is that fair, Jason?
It is, yeah. We pick a concept which has been given in defense of somebody's perspective to do with their faith, and then we have a look and see if that concept lines up with what the Tanakh says. Today, we're tackling again, it's a 119 subject video that they've put forward, and it's to do with Psalm 110, which is quite a famous missionary tool in trying to prove that the concept of Jesus as Messiah was around before the lifespan of Jesus.
We've done this before. We've done Psalm 110 before, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we've covered it. I think it may have been when we were going through the book of Hebrews.
It was. It might. In fact, you know what? I think it was even the first of our Hebrew Roots series. If I remember correctly, what we didn't address in that video was verse 1 of Psalm 110. Shall I read it?
Do.
Okay, so in the English it reads like this. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord said to my Lord. Now, in my New King James translation, I have the Lord said to my Lord in capitals, the second one beginning with the capital and followed by lowercase.
Yeah, so what we're going to find is that in that particular line, in many translations, you're going to get the first Lord in all caps, and they're trying to give you a hint there that that's not what it says. It doesn't say Lord, it's got the tetragrammaton there. And then in some translations, you're going to find that the second Lord has a capitalized L to make it a divine thing, when the actual word there is Adoni, which literally just means Lord or Master. And I've got a list here of some other places where that was used. What's interesting is that I've got 7 verses here which still use that word Adoni, and in the context that they're used in elsewhere in the Tanakh, Christian missionaries never bring these verses up to prove that that word means Jesus. Right? You won't find a capital L on any of these lords.
No, so the first one that you mentioned is in relation to Abraham. The second one you mentioned is in relation to Esau, being referred to as Ladoni and my master or my Lord. And but in this particular case, what we're going to see is that 119 wants to apply this to Jesus, and what you're saying is there's examples, other examples in the Tanakh where this is used. They don't
and more importantly,
highlight this.
More importantly, La'adoni as a Hebrew word never is used to represent God in the whole of Tanakh. You won't find another example of that word meaning God. So you'll find plenty of examples of it not, but you won't find any examples saying that this is in any way a divine or a divinity being represented.
No, but so Psalm 110 can be understood, in various ways, and a lot of them are fair, really. And the 119 video agrees. It kicks off by agreeing that it can be that it is reasonably possible that David wrote the psalm to be sung by the Levites, written in the third person about himself. 119 also acknowledges that some believe it may have been written at a later time period, again about David, and they're perfectly fine with that. They say that they agree that it's certainly a possibility, as their words. They continue saying just as easily as it could refer to King David, it could also refer to the Messiah. It is a Messiah, but what they're saying is the Messiah. They're talking about the end times, the Messianic age Messiah. That's fair?
Yeah, that's fair. But what they did is they skipped the first part of the psalm. So they start talking about verse 1, but they miss the David.
A psalm of David.
Yeah, they missed
which is
that
verse
out.
1, of course,
right.
in Hebrew. That's the verse 1 in Hebrew, yeah.
And that's Lo David, which is to David or for David. It's something that's directed towards David. And interestingly, we always read a psalm. And what I found out while I was doing this is that psalm, the word comes from psalmos, which is the Greek for song. So even I've got Jewish books, which we'll still call them Psalms because that's what the world's learned to use.
So we have the Greek to thank for the ridiculous P at the beginning of Psalm.
Yeah, utterly. That's
That's
exactly
where
right.
that's
Yeah.
where it comes from. Okay.
But
And what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but the point that you're making is that it could equally say David, a psalm. It's not necessarily a psalm of David. It could be a psalm to David, but it's attributed for or to David. David, a psalm. Is that fair?
yeah, and so the argument that they made was that this may have been written later on, or it may have been written at the period of the time. But whichever way it was meant to be directed towards David. Because I've read a commentary which thinks this is about Abraham. And when you look at the argument, it's actually quite strong. And I've read commentaries that says this is about David at the beginning of his reign, or his career, if you like, and he took on the Philistines. And there are really good scriptural point-for-point references of lines in the Psalm against lines in the Tanakh.
They say that their preference, of course, is that it is a messianic psalm, that it's about the Messiah. And the reason why they go there, they quote, first of all, before they explain, they quote, it's really weird. I don't know if you noticed this, they quoted Deuteronomy 19:15. Did you notice that?
I think that
What's that about?
we need to do a program on this. Right?
This is the two witnesses. They say, "Oh, now we think it's messianic," which is fine. I'm willing to go there with them. They say, and they say, "Look, in the interest of keeping all things biblical, we're going to supply two witnesses, which is extra biblical witnesses. They go to the Septuagint, they go to the New Testament as the two witnesses. And they say, and the reason why we do this is, of course, biblical principle, Deuteronomy 19:15. Jason.
Yeah, so we need to do a show on this because this comes up all the time, and I think it's one of the most frustrating things in the world. When someone turns around and says, well, I have 2 or 3 witnesses, and I'm like, to a crime? Did you see someone rape somebody? Is someone broken into your house? They go, no, biblically, we've got the different verses which can... But what's really, really great is that, all right, supposing you do come from a mindset where you think that you can find 2 or 3 verses to support a concept, and you think that that's a biblical thing to do because of the 2 or 3 witnesses mentioned in Deuteronomy 19. What no one ever reads on is that the judges shall make diligent inquisitions, and if the witness is a false witness and has testified falsely against his brother, and if you want to put that into a biblical textual concept, you could say that, and if you find that any of the text you're using as a witness isn't 100% true, then you have to dismiss it as a witness. So if you did want to go the
Now, this is
textual...
look. Just on that, the funny thing is, though, I mean, if you continue reading to the end of that passage, or indeed the end of the chapter, it goes on to say, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. And if we go to Matthew chapter 5, this is the Sermon on the Mount, right? And you have Jesus saying, you've heard it said, do not swear falsely, right? Which is what we're talking about here. It's talking about false witnesses. It says, do not swear falsely. Oh, but I say to you, don't swear at all. But that's not what Deuteronomy is saying. They quote Deuteronomy 19:15 to justify their use of the Septuagint, which actually is not the Septuagint, right, Jason?
Right.
This is the Brentons that they're quoting. It's the Greek translation of the Tanakh, which we find more often than not changed to fit the New Testament.
Yeah, they're using a vegetarian cookbook to prove that vegetarian food is the right option.
Okay, and then so the actual Septuagint we don't have. Nobody has the original Septuagint, the Greek translation don't have it, don't know. And they use the New Testament. Now, the things that they find compelling, primarily out of 110 verse 4 and 5, the Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, a priest forever. So they go, well, see, David wasn't a priest. So what do you make of that? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, it's interesting because this is something that they jump straight onto. The reason that this can't be David is because David wasn't the priest, and they argue that the priests have to come from the house of Levi. He never came from that house, and I'm wondering, well, which house did Jesus come from? But that's not the point. The point is that the priesthood mentioned here that they link to is Melchizedek. Melchizedek wasn't a priest in the temple either. He doesn't come from that family line. He's completely separate. Priest in the text just means a priest. It doesn't necessarily mean a Davidic priest. It doesn't mean necessarily a Levitical priest. We have Jethro, who's also a priest in the wilderness.
Yep.
And it was someone who
Jethro is a priest of Midian, yeah.
Right?
We've got Egyptian priests. We hear, in fact, I think that's the first use of the word, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's exactly the same word in Hebrew. Exactly the same word. It just means priest. Like you can have a doctor of law and you can have a doctor of science and you can have a doctor of medicine. It's just a doctor. Now, but where they don't go is the Melchizedek thing. Again, we cover this quite a lot in the Hebrew Roots thing series we did, the Hebrew Roots of the Book of Hebrews. And when we've got Melchizedek, it can mean lots of different things. Now you have to remember that he was the king of Salem, and Salem is Jerusalem. So now we've got the verse saying that you shall be in the service of God forever, just like the king of Jerusalem, or just like the righteous leader. And there's all these options for what Melchizedek means, and they can all line up with David. What they do is they start with the book of Hebrews, and then they jump back with that definition of Melchizedek to the Son.
Yeah, that's right. But they stick with the priest thing, and they say, look, David wasn't a priest, therefore it's not about David, that the Messiah option is the only other option. But, of course, that's not fair because, as we just demonstrated, the term priest is applied. I mean, even David's sons are referred to as priests, later on. But it doesn't mean that they're descendants of Levi. It means that they have a specific function that is to serve in that capacity. So the other reason that they found the Messiah interpretation compelling, besides that one, is verse 5. Verse 5 says, the Lord is at your right hand. He shall execute kings in the day of his wrath. And they said, oh, well, execute kings. That hasn't happened at this stage, and therefore it can't be talking about David. It must be talking about the Messiah of the Messianic age. But of course, and look, that's fine. I'm maybe they're onto something. But Jesus didn't execute any kings.
So if you go to Chabad and look at their Tanakh, that verse 5 is going to say, the Lord on your right hand has crushed kings on the day of his wrath, because their interpretation of this is about Abraham. But even if you say this interpretation is about David, David had a career in warfare in which many opposing nations were crushed. So it's to say that no kings were crushed during the lifespan of David seems a bit ridiculous. And as you said, no kings were crushed.
You just said something of Jesus. No, that's right. Now, you just said something really interesting. That's right. So it's Rashi's interpretation, or right. He floats the idea that Psalm 110 is referring to Abraham. And I kind of find that compelling. Now, it's a funny thing because 119, their catchphrase, of course, is, test everything. They say, well, he's not a priest, and he didn't crush the heads of any kings. Therefore, the only option left to us is that it is referring to the Messiah of the Messianic age. But they didn't check Rashi. And I find Rashi compelling because Abraham, from out of Abraham comes both priest and king. Okay. And also, as you mentioned, in Genesis chapter 14, it tells how Abraham and his servants pursued successfully and attacked the four kings, regaining all the plunder and so on and so forth. So I can see really how this could apply to Abraham, and that being the case, David will well be a psalm written by David. It checks all the boxes. Just saying.
They finished their video with speaking about where this is used in Matthew 22. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think that's quite interesting.
Isn't it interesting? It is. It's really... So, all right, let's jump to that in the interest of time, because rather than saying who is the second Lord in 110 verse 1, we could just say who is it not? And of course, 119 saying it's Jesus. And they take us to Matthew 22, 41 to 46. And so they say to him, he says, the Messiah, what do you reckon? Whose son is he? And they go, well, he's the son of David. No, of course they say that. Because that's what the Torah says. That's what the Tanakh says. The Tanakh says very, very clearly, not only will he be the son of David, he'll also be the son of Solomon. There's no question about that. It's very, very clear in the text. And of course they would say that. And then Jesus goes, oh, but if I pull a rabbit out of my hat, and they go, oh, His superior wisdom is far beyond our knowledge. Run away, run away. What?
I remember the first time, having gone through the journey, I remember the first time that I found out that Messiah doesn't mean Jesus, that there are Messiahs all the way through the Bible. And I was of the mindset that the only Messiah, this only Christos, was this Jesus dude. And then there's nothing else. And I imagine what that must be like for a doctor to have this 7-year-old come up to them and say, I broke a bone. And the doctor's like, which bone? And they went, what do you mean, which bone? I've only got one bone. It's the one that's broken. And that must be what it was like when these Pharisees were stood together. And this guy comes up, starts talking about the Messiah. And then, because what the guy in 119 says is, he says, did you catch that they say the Messiah is the son of David and not David himself? That's what they say. So his mindset is that all the Pharisees thought that the only Messiah was David. That's what the 119 speaker thinks. He thinks the Pharisees only believed that David was the Messiah and that Jesus was the same. And that's why this argument works. Whereas the Pharisees have just been asked by this person. He says to the Pharisees, what do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he? And he's already pre-baiting that in his own mind, that they think that David is the Messiah. Because that's the whole argument. How could David be the Messiah if he's also his Lord? Interestingly, the counter-missionary argument is that how can Jesus not be God because he does the same thing? That's kind of a funny thing. Jesus can't be God because he prays to God.
Right. So there's a couple of takes on this, right? Because there's also the idea that the son of David, therefore, why does David call him Ladoni if it's his son? And so it's all beside the point, actually, because the question is, I mean, look, what is the writer of Matthew having Jesus prove here? What do you think he's trying to prove? What is the...
Well, that's one of the issues here, is that the same manipulation of text that we read in Christian Bibles relating to Psalm 110 is repeated in Matthew 22 in the Greek. So I'll give you an example. When Matthew 22 in the Greek is put into Hebrew, it says, said the Lord. Now, when we go to the word Lord, it doesn't have the name of God there. It has Kurios.
It does. It has Kurios said to Kurios.
Yeah, Kurios says to, I think there's a different one in the second one, Kurio. And Kurio is literally le Kuri. Like you've got le Adoni. So it's two. So it's literally Kurios to Kurio. But what's funny here is that we don't have the name of God. We just have this word Kurio. And if I look up what Kurio means, even in the Christian Strongs, Kurio literally only means sir or master. So Jesus went up to the Pharisees, according to the inspired New Testament in the Greek, which is the only form we have, and using the words that Jesus probably didn't use, because there's no way he would have spoken Greek to the Pharisees. He literally said, the master said to my master, or sir said to my sir. It doesn't mention the name of God in this at all. Now, if I was a Pharisee who spent my whole life studying Hebrew scripture and Tanakh, and this Jewish person walks in off the street and says, yeah, well, what about the bit that says, my master said to my master? I'd be like, what are you talking about? That's not even what it says in the Psalms. And I probably would stand there dumbfounded and unable to answer the question, because the question doesn't make any sense. That's what I'd be thinking. It's just so odd.
Well, if you if you put it like that, I can appreciate your point. But according to the writer of Hebrews, has the Pharisees clearly understanding what passage he's referring to. But but what is the point of, again? What is the point Jesus is trying to make?
Well, Jesus is trying to say that that David can't have been the Messiah because the Messiah, because if the lowercase Lord was David in the Psalm, then how could David have written that Psalm in the third person about himself if he was speaking about somebody else, this Messiah guy? Okay. But I think the whole concept here is
if the second Lord though is a son of David, and they understand this verse to be messianic, then what is Jesus's point?
Well, that's the whole argument that the 119 guy makes. He's trying to
Okay.
say that at the time of the New Testament, or at the time in Jesus' life, that the understanding in Pharisaical circles and in this new Messianic group was that this Lord meant Messiah. But we, up to this point, we don't have any reason to believe that was the case. Now, we can say it was Messianic because David was a Messiah. That's perfectly fair. And even if we totally accept what 119 wants us to accept and say that this is a Messianic text, we could do that too. The problem is, how do we qualify Jesus as the Messiah that they're talking about? They start off with the preposition that Jesus, and there's even there's the 1-1 video. I just have to say very quickly, it's very good. I'll find the graphic. There's a 1-1 video that starts off by saying, we are going to assume for the purposes of this program that Jesus was the Messiah written about in the Messianic text, in the Hebrew text. And that's what they do in this. They assume that Jesus was the Messiah. And then once they've got that cat in the basket, which they don't prove in the program, then they argue that this is a Messianic text. And because it's a Messianic text, it must apply to Jesus, even though Jesus didn't do anything mentioned in it.
So, okay, so, all right. So, well, let's put this aside, let's put Matthew 22 aside for a second, and let's go back and let's talk about the Messiah. The Pharisees' answer was the Messiah, the Christ, will be a son of David. And that's very clearly in the text, and not only a son of David, but a son of Solomon. And we see that in 2 Samuel chapter 7. And this is Nathan, the prophet Nathan, speaking to David. And he says, when your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you. I think in the Hebrew it says seed to seed. Now that's important because the kingship, the messiahship, is inherited from father to son, father to son, father to son, all the way along. There's no exception. It's just, and this is exactly what it says here: seed to seed. I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body. I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. And now it goes on to say in verse 16, and your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. And cross-referencing, I won't read them now, but cross-referencing 1 Chronicles chapter 22, verse 6, 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 17 to 18. This is very clearly Solomon. All Christian theologians agree this is talking about Solomon. Therefore, the Messiah must come not only from David, but through Solomon. The Pharisees are right to say that the Messiah will be the... But the interesting thing is, of course, that, well, two interesting things. Number one, Luke, the Gospel of Luke, can be thrown out right at the very beginning because the genealogy of David, but it doesn't have Solomon. So according to Luke, Jesus is not the Messiah. Matthew can be thrown out as well because we're to understand that Jesus is of a virgin birth, and therefore he is not a paternal descendant of David.
I don't know what you do with it. I mean, that's
fair.
My takeaway from the whole video was that they didn't prove that Jesus was A, the Messiah, or B, the person being spoken about in this at all. The whole argument is this is probably a messianic text, and we can't prove either way. That's what my takeaway was.
So that's the way they're right. So they begin by saying, "Oh, look, this could be about David. We certainly think that's a possibility." That's what they say. 119 say that. It could be about David. No worries. But then they go on and say, "But you know what? We think it's about Jesus." So now I've just demonstrated that the Tanakh says it cannot be about Jesus. Therefore, what they considered plausible is more likely, is it not? But you know what? I really do think that the more I think about it, I think Rashi is really onto something, and I think it could well be written by David about Abraham, and I'd encourage people to check that out. But there's two very, very plausible And certainly, again, 119 saying that it's about David is plausible. The third person hypothesis is a plausible thing. They accept that. What is absolutely not plausible or possible, according to the Tanakh, is that Jesus is this Messiah because he's not, according to the New Testament, not a paternal descendant of David or Solomon. Are we done?
We are done. That was super fast. Brilliant.
Hey, it's not even the 119 guy. They've got a new guy. I don't know who he is.
Yeah, some stuff going on there we shouldn't talk about on the video. But yeah, no, good to see some new faces. That means we're not zeroing in on a particular person.
So we are going to the land of Israel again for the Tanakh tour. That is this coming November, dear people. I know a lot of people are thinking about coming. A lot of people want to come. They have not yet put down their deposits, but we're finalizing numbers in September. Do you
have a deadline? Because this video is obviously going to be up in the future. And so is there kind of a time in September they should be booked by?
And definitely before the end of September, because we're finalizing numbers. And the sooner the better, actually. So if you would like to join us with Rabbi Tovia Singer, going around the land.
If you want to travel up and down Israel with Rabbi Tovia Singer and Jono and a bus full of very cool people and visit the Dead Sea and the tunnels in Jerusalem, all the hidden places that the normal tours won't take you on, this is the tour for you. So I would suggest that it's now, just so people know, this video was uploaded in 2016. If you want to get on the bus, then by the end of September or as soon as possible in 2016, you need to go over to truthtoyou.org. You'll see the link on the front page and there'll be a link under this video as well. And pre-book your seat now. Get it sorted. It's a life-changing event.
10 days, 9 nights. Loved for you to join us. And there is still room on the bus, but don't leave it. Put your deposit down now because we're running out of time and we do have to finalize numbers this September. All right, cool. We're done. Are we done?
We are. We will be back very soon with another video on another subject. But like I said, if you've got questions, leave them underneath. Also, take the time to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Only 1 out of 4 people that watch these videos subscribed. And that means 3 out of 4 are probably missing other videos that are going up. And you can see more of Jono over at truthtoyou.org. He's got a huge stable of really great shows with some really great guests. And other than that, we'll see you all again very soon.